Talk. I am Dr. Anita Raja, and I hope all of you are doing really well. Like every week, today we have an excellent topic that we are going to discuss with an expert. The idea is to have an open and frank discussion about vaccine hesitancy today. If you have any questions around the vaccine, you're more than welcome to WhatsApp us on 075-858-35150. The number's on your screens, or you can call us. When it comes to vaccine hesitancy, in 2019, WHO regarded vaccine hesitancy as a global threat. And of course, we've seen that during the pandemic, one of the biggest challenges that most healthcare professionals have faced is vaccine hesitancy. Why are people so hesitant? Why are there still health inequalities within the healthcare system, especially when it comes to people of color? Why do they not believe in their healthcare professional and the advice given to them? Is it just as simple as it seems? Are these just myths that they're following? Or is there more of a history behind it? This and much more we're going to discuss today with lovely Dr. Shamaila Anwar, who is here on our show today. Welcome, Shamaila.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for taking out time and coming on our show today. First of all, I wanted to ask you, you're a PhD doctor, and of course, you know, you're into science and research and all sorts of things. But when it came to the pandemic, you were very, very active when it came to bust misinformation. I wouldn't want to call them myths because, you know, it's a sensitive topic. Let's call it misinformation around vaccine hesitancy. And you were quite active, and you were part of a UN verified initiative of healthcare professionals, epidemiologists, scientists all around the world, Team Halo. And you're very active on TikTok, making these videos, spreading awareness. Why?
I think for me, it was about supporting my own community initially, and then it spread out into sort of a wider, the wider kind of British, Pakistani Muslim community. And I think from my perspective, it was very much around why are we hesitant when I understand the importance of vaccination? What is it that's making my community hesitant towards being vaccinated? And so when I started looking into it much more, there was much more of an issue, I think, in terms of the historical background of our communities coming to the UK. And then that got me thinking in terms of how do we try and address these issues that are so inherent within our systems, in our healthcare system, in our education system. And so that's where kind of my journey into vaccine hesitancy began.
And Shamaila, you know, when you started your journey from your sort of, I understand your healthcare professionals around you would have supported you. But when it came to your family, extended family, people within your community, what was their reaction?
I think initially at the start of the pandemic, we knew that, you know, this particular virus was affecting Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups at a much higher rate. We also were getting calls that, you know, basically research is the answer to getting us out of this pandemic. And so at the start of the pandemic, our communities were being called upon to take part in research, and they'd never been asked before. They'd never been engaged with before. And from my perspective and from my community's perspective, there was this great disconnect in terms of what do we do now? You know, is this a valid ask of us? You know, why are they asking us? Why are they prioritizing us? There was a lot of suspicion around, you know, initially being asked to be involved in research, and then also then once the vaccines had been identified and were being developed. And it was really difficult at time because I could completely understand some of the challenges, some of the concerns that my community had. But in the end, we were in a public health emergency. So what do we do? So we needed to establish kind of clear lines of communication, help people understand, you know, the science behind the vaccines, helping to unpick some of the challenges and concerns people had in a sensitive way, in a non-judgmental way. Because from my perspective, this wasn't about our communities not understanding what the ask was of us. It was more to do with trust, building that trust, helping people understand, helping to engage with them to understand what this was all about. This was something unprecedented, uncharted territory for us. We've known that our communities don't tend to take part in research initially and are rather wary of vaccines. I mean, I saw the same when the flu vaccine came out in the 1990s. My parents were quite hesitant at first, but now 10, 15 years later, they're kind of first in the queue. And from, in terms of my family, my parents, I mean, they were first in the queue when it came to the COVID vaccines. They felt that they had to set an example. My family is quite a go-to family within our community for help and support. So they felt that it was their duty to set the example.
Which is excellent. We've got a question here. So the question is, I have a couple of friends that are hesitant to get the vaccine for various reasons. What do you think I could do, if anything, to help them understand that it's perfectly safe?
I think first and foremost, it's reassuring your friends that, being hesitant about what we put in our bodies and thinking about what we put in our bodies is entirely normal. And it's entirely normal to have concerns about any medication that you put in your body in particular, and trying to sort of get at it from a very non-judgmental route. And that's very difficult, particularly in a pandemic when we're all called upon to do our bit. And there are some people that are doing their bit and putting themselves forward, and there's some that are maybe more hesitant. You've got to understand what the history and the concerns are behind that hesitancy. It could be that they've had a family member that has been part of a trial previously and it hasn't gone as well. It may be that they are concerned because they've heard, different bits of misinformation on social media. And it's so difficult these days. I think this pandemic has been like no other in terms of misinformation because of social media. It's so easy for people to set themselves up as a legitimate concern on the internet, and then be able to spout lots of incorrect information about the vaccines, and then some unwitting person comes in, looks at that particular website, looks at that source, and it looks real, it looks legitimate, and they take it away and they think it's the truth. I think it's really important to help you understand where the hesitancy is coming from, is that you understand where they're getting their information from and what their concerns are.
But it gets very difficult sometimes, doesn't it? I mean, I was following your TikTok account, and sometimes the sort of arguments that come through can get very frustrating. I mean, you are part of a very strong initiative, which is backed and verified by the UN. What would you say is your biggest challenge when it comes to trying to convince people to take the vaccine, be vaccinated?
I think the biggest challenge is the two main things. A, that COVID isn't as bad as what people are making out. That is a main challenge. That is a really big challenge. And secondly, that the vaccines haven't been approved. And both of those kind of concerns aren't particularly valid. Although when I'm trying to speak to somebody about it, I try to use terminology that isn't as kind of emotive. As saying that, basically. I think it's really important that we understand, that everybody nowadays considers themselves an expert in all kind of areas, because, Dr. Google is out there. Just because people are experts in one area doesn't mean they're experts in another area. So, for example, if there's any concerns about the kind of immune response to vaccines, it's really important that you get information from a verified immunologist like Dr. Banar. If it's concerns to do with kind of female health, it's Dr. Nigar Arif. These people know what we're talking about. It's really important to understand that you get information from verified sources.
Yeah, there's another question we've got. So I've heard multiple things about getting the booster vaccine, and I'm slightly uncertain as to what's the best way to go about it. Do you guys have any relevant information that might clear this up for me?
So I think boosters are supposed to be given around, I think, 3 months, 12 weeks after the second dose. I think, the research that that's kind of taken place, and the data that's coming through at the moment is suggesting that a booster vaccine is valid and should be taken upon if you get the opportunity, or when you get the opportunity. I think if you have any specific concerns about that, either because you're worried about side effects, etc., please go and speak to your doctor or other healthcare professional. I think it's really important to go and speak to somebody and get your concerns allayed before you do anything.
No, excellent. And Dr. Anwar, also when we talk about the booster vaccine, there is now robust data, and it's not just a premature data, robust data to suggest that if you've had all 3 vaccines, then you're 92% less likely to get critically unwell with COVID and end up in ITU. I think if I were, to make a decision and somebody puts this data in front of me, then I would certainly go for the booster jab and sort of, protect myself and my loved ones. So it is something that is robust data now. It's not just something that we're saying or we've heard from some, unknown sources. So it's important that we sort of take that on board. Dr. Shamaila, we're going to go on a break very shortly. But, before we go on to the break, are there any resources on the internet which are reliable? If somebody wants to look up something that is reliable in terms of the vaccine, do you know of any websites that they can use or go to?
Yes, I think there are a number of different websites and different resources. So you've obviously got the TikTok accounts for verified individuals that are linked with Team Halo. I think first and foremost, they're a really, really good, easy one-stop shop to find out information on different side effects and different aspects of the vaccines. I think if it's things like to do with with fertility, I would go to the Royal College of Midwifery and Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology website. They've provided very, very clear summaries about the different data and different studies relating to the vaccines in relation to pregnancy, childbirth, and newborn babies. So it's really important that, whatever resource you choose, it's verified.
Definitely. And as we all know, there are a lot of questions around the vaccine hesitancy, and we're going to try our best to sort of address these. But viewers, it's shortly going to be time for a break. If you want to be part of our show, it's extremely easy. Our number is on your screen, 075-858-35150. It's time for a break. You have to stay with us to be part of this interesting conversation. I'm Dr. Anita Raja. Before we went on to the break, we were speaking to our lovely guest, Dr. Shamaila Anwar, who's here with us today and discussing a very, very sensitive topic, which is vaccine hesitancy. Dr. Shamaila, before we went on to the break, we talked about, all the resources that we can use if we want to ask a question, if you're not worried about getting vaccinated. And now there's a lot of push from the government and also from healthcare professionals in terms of getting the booster jab. And of course, it's backed with science and data, but there is still a lot of hesitancy, especially with people who are now getting a bit fed up. It was one vaccine, the second, and now there's a booster jab as well. It is a bit of a challenge. But initially during the program, you did mention that there's a history behind why people are hesitant, especially from the South Asian community, from the Black Asian minority ethnic group. And when it comes to research, scientific research, we see that there is a lot of exclusion as well. I am always very surprised when I'm looking at data which comes in terms of women's health, menopause, for instance, and the data that we've got is usually around Caucasian women, and there's absolutely no comparison in the menopausal age of a Caucasian woman to a South Asian, for instance. A South Asian woman will probably reach menopause much sooner, but there's not enough data to back that. Yet, we've got no information because of the same reason, exclusion. You work with the NIHR. Tell us a bit more about the initiatives that they're taking to change the scene now.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the NIHR and what it is, and then kind of what the initiatives are. So the NIHR was established by the Department of Health and Social Care in 2006 with the express mission to improve the health and wealth of the nation through research. It plays a key role in the government strategy for economic growth and attracts investment from the life sciences industry. So the NIHR supports research in 4 ways. It trains and develops researchers for the future. It funds research. It disseminates research, i.e. communicates research. And it also supports the delivery of research. So when you go into a hospital or any healthcare setting, you know, whether it's for anything from, you know, being a cancer patient right through to, you know, going for an ear test or a sight test, you may have the opportunity to be involved in research. And to ensure that those opportunities are there for you, the NIHR, the clinical research network part of the NIHR, which is where I work, actually ensures that there's enough infrastructure support there, so funding there for that research to be offered to you. So ensuring that the kind of research is kind of hand in hand with the care, the health and care that a person receives in hospital is really, really important, because it allows us then to translate the findings of research straight into care, basically. So it kind of stops the delay between, you know, what we call from bench to bedside. It reduces the time that basically any new research it comes into practice. And you know, part of that is ensuring that part of that is to actually ensure that we are shoring up the NHS, so we're future-proofing the NHS. And also part of that is to ensure that if you're a patient and you come into hospital, you get the most up-to-date, cutting-edge treatment that is available for any condition at that time.
But the thing is that, you know, there are now initiatives where we are thinking of including people from the BAME community. But how are we going to ensure that they will be willing to come forward and be part of the research? That's where we are, you know, sort of lagging behind, isn't it? So how will we overcome that barrier?
Okay, so we know that the UK is made up of around 13 or 14% Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, but we also know that there's nowhere near that participation in research. And, you know, we've known that for a number of years, but the pandemic has really, really shone a spotlight on it because, as you know, our communities were disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And when the call came that research is the answer, you know, we were not getting people from our community taking part in research. And that was a really, really important point, because in order for us to develop medicines, so any medicine that's basically available on the shelves today, from paracetamol right through to antibiotics, through to very complex chemotherapy and radiotherapy, has gotten there through research. And in order to ensure that that medication is acceptable and is appropriate for everybody, we need people from all walks of life to take part in research. And that to date has never happened for our Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And I think there's a number of reasons for this. I think the biggest reason is trust. Our communities have suffered, you know, a legacy of kind of racism and discrimination. And that has included issues with, you know, unethical ways in which research have been conducted before. So we know that there's key examples like the Tuskegee trial in the US and the meningitis trial, for example, in Nigeria in the 1990s. So, you know, for my part, I'm thinking, you know, is it any wonder our communities aren't coming forward when we've had such a litany of issues that we've had to deal with that have all led to one thing, and that is mistrust of organizations, mistrust of, you know, the government system, etc. So it's really, really important that we need to address that both as the NIHR and the NHS. And we know that there are a number of initiatives now to ensure that that happens. So we've got things like the Include initiative within the NIHR that's really helping us to understand how we engage with communities, how we ensure that we're not just going in, it's not just helicopter research, that we're going into communities where we're thinking, you know, oh, we just want them to be involved in research and that's it. That there needs to be certain level of engagement in advance of that. We need to go into communities, we need to understand how they work, we need to understand what the challenges are, and this is all about helping us to understand the communities that we serve.
Yeah, but it would be useful if people of color within the healthcare profession, people like you and me, you know, imams, they're also part of this initiative.
they're flying the flag. Yes. So that's essentially one of the big initiatives that we have, is actually understanding the people that we need to link in with from each community to help get our message out there. This isn't about kind of us forcing people into things. This is about going in, helping us understand what are the health challenges of a particular community, and helping them to understand, you know, that part of it may well be something that we can resolve through research. If we don't research, if we don't understand what the issue is from every angle, then we're not going to be able to treat that or put a solution in place for that particular challenge.
Definitely. We've got another question. It's around the booster jab again. I think the booster jab is very hot today. It's a hot topic. I've got my first booster jab a couple of weeks ago. I'm just worried that it might not be able to make it for the next one when it's due, as I have a really busy work schedule. How detrimental would it be if I was a few days later than the 3-month mark for the booster jab, the third one?
I don't think a couple of weeks here and there, I don't think would make any difference. I mean, if we're looking at kind of months and months and months down the line, obviously we know that kind of immunity wanes after a while. But I think, you know, a couple of days here and there is not going to make any difference. I think as soon as possible, try to get your jab booked in.
Lovely. Yes, please protect yourselves and your family and your loved ones. I know we're harping on the same string again and again, but really there is robust data now. It is not, a trial anymore, and the vaccine was not prematurely, rolled out. There's another question around the premature rollout of vaccine. Dr. Shamaila, could you tell our viewers? This is a question that we get. I asked quite a lot, actually, that it was premature, it was too quick. What do you have to say to people who ask you this question?
I think it's really important to understand that we were not starting from scratch with the vaccines. So in terms of the technology that we've used, you know, the mRNA technology or the viral vector technology that the AZ vaccine uses, both these technologies had been kind of been trialed in different ways and been experimented in different ways for a number of years, for at least 30 years, we're talking. We also know a lot about the coronavirus itself from the previous variants that we had, the previous versions of the coronavirus we had. We know it's starting from scratch. The other aspect to this is that usually when it comes to research, we are having to apply for research funding, getting the approval and ethics and everything one after the other. But in this case, everything happened at the same time. And that isn't because we were cutting corners. This was about being efficient in the way that we delivered it. So we pivoted basically all of the UK's infrastructure and resource to understanding, you know, what we needed to do to identify an appropriate vaccine and identify appropriate treatments. So saying that, you know, this was done too quickly, I can understand why people are making that assumption, but to absolutely assure you, there is absolutely no way all of the regulatory agencies, and bearing in mind, in the UK, we've probably got one of the most strictest regulatory agencies there is, that nothing gets past them. That, you know, we would be basically committing something very illegal if we were just saying rolling out the vaccines without them being approved and without that constant monitoring that we're doing. And that happens to all medication, not just vaccines. We monitor from literally before the vaccine rolls out into a clinical trial, through a clinical trial, right through to actually when it comes into standard care and normal treatment pathways. And we do that because we need to ensure that that there's nothing that's coming in that's kind of telling us that this is actually doing more harm than good. It's all about risk and benefit. And we are weighing up the whole time. The public health community, the research community, the scientific community is looking at the data and weighing up, are the vaccines, are they still more beneficial than they are risky? More beneficial than they are risky. And that's literally what we're looking at. And that's why we monitor the data so closely.
Yeah. Dr. Shamaila, it was such a pleasure to speak to you today. I mean, it is always a pleasure to speak to people who are here to answer the questions that our viewers ask. And also, the vaccine hesitancy has been a bit of a problem throughout the pandemic and still is. And it's very unfortunate that if we've got the opportunity to get vaccinated, we don't, because there's so many countries in the world, third world countries, who would happily get vaccinated today if they would have the resources, but unfortunately, they don't. Thank you so so much once again for coming on our show. Viewers, I hope you enjoyed our show today. The topic was a very sensitive one, vaccine hesitancy. It is a topic which I discuss quite a lot because the idea is that we spread lots of awareness around this. If you want to be part of our show again next week, please tune in again next week. It's time for us to say goodbye. Look after yourselves. Allah Hafiz.